Now that the chairman of the committee is here, I want to thank everybody for being here today. This is the Public Safety Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee. We heard from several agencies yesterday. We will hear from the balance of the agencies today. And first one out of the chute, Prosecuting Attorneys Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is David Miller. I'm the DA down in the Southern Circuit, Moultrie Valley, Thomasville. I've got with me today Stan Gunner, who's our Deputy Director, and Michael Parkinson, our budget analyst. I'd just like to remind the committee that 90% of our budget goes to fund your district attorney's offices. About 10% of it goes to fund the Prosecuting Attorneys Council over here in the bar building, which provides the administrative, some legal, and technical support to your DAs. Unlike some of the larger agencies that y'all deal with, you only fund the district attorneys for salaries and benefits and a little bit of travel. We're over 99% salary and benefits and less than 1% travel at this point. And to give you an example of the type of things we do with that travel, the Okmulgee Circuit has 8 counties in that circuit. They have 1 juvenile prosecutor who travels to all 8 of those counties doing juvenile court. That's the type of thing we use our travel money for. Last June, you know that we closed all 3 branch offices of PAC in Macon, Savannah, and Albany, and all those cases that they had been handling were shifted to the DA's offices in those areas. The current number of employees from PAC is down from about a high of 49 down to around 33 employees. In the last 3 fiscal years, we have furloughed all the DA and PAC employees 24 days through this November. And, there's only 22 work days in a month. So our employees have been furloughed over a month in order for us to make payroll. When we have the type of cuts that we've had the last 3 years, when you're nothing but payroll, that's where you have to take up the slack. We have not laid off any DA employees. We had that reduction in force at the PAC office. But in the DA's offices, it was our intent, and the way we handled that is that we have delayed replacing people when the vacancy occurred. Even though all of those positions in the DA's office are authorized by statute, we just didn't have the money to pay everybody when somebody left. And so if they left, we've been having a 4-month delay in hiring those people in the DA's offices. Additionally, we've done it with the furloughs. So that's how we've handled these cuts. Have been made the last several years. You know that last July 1st you added judgeships, which had been delayed for a while, but you added those judgeships in Atlanta, in Alcovey, and Brunswick. And we were not funded for the ADAs that went along with those positions. So again, we had to put those people to work because you got to have the ADAs there working for the judges that are on the bench. And the way we paid those salaries, we just incorporated it again with furloughs. Periodically, we'll meet at PAC. We'll see how much money y'all have appropriated for us to work on, how many people we've got, and we make the decisions how to keep a balanced budget. We've been digging out of that hole from June of 2009 when Governor Perdue reduced our allotments 25% in the month of June. During that month, we were already furloughing our people 2 days a month. There was no way that we could furlough them another 4 days during the month of June of 2009. So we made the choice to keep them on the job. We paid them that month. And then last year, we made that up again with furloughs, which is the only way we could go about doing it. And so in this July, we returned about $850,000 to the state treasury. About $650,000 of that was from that deficit that we had incurred in June of 2009 when we kept our people on the payroll. And that other $200,000, unfortunately, was a day and a quarter furlough. We wouldn't have the furlough if we could have sharpened our pencils a little bit better. But out of a $55 million budget, to come down and just have that $200,000 left over, we thought was probably doing pretty good for lawyers. I know we watch the state address, we read the paper, we hear about wanting to downsize government. I would just tell you, in terms of the DA staff, those victim advocates are important to us. Although only 16 of us have those Y'all created 10 of them and funded them in 2004 with the assumption, I guess, going to be y'all going to fund about 10 a year until everybody had a victim advocate. 2005, you came back and gave us 6. And then the money problem started, and no victim advocates have ever been added to the state payroll in the DA's office since then. So only 1/3 of your DA offices have a victim advocate. But those people are so important to us that 519 state employees and another 30-something at PAC have been furloughed a total of 15 days the last 3 years to keep them on the job. If you want to look at it in terms of what we furloughed in order to make our payroll. So I'll just say that from an emotional standpoint, none of us want to lose those victim advocates. Those ladies do a great job dealing with our victims. Those that were hired in the first round are now going into about their 7th year of service to the citizens of the state, have not vested their retirement. You know, that's the emotional side of it. Looking at it in terms of hard budget numbers, that is the only position that it seems to me that the DAs could stand to be laid off if we had to lay off, because only 1/3 of us have them. But I do want you to know that they're important enough to us that everybody has been furloughed in our offices to keep them on these past several years. So those are the points I wanted to make to y'all today. I'll now touch up. If you've got any questions that I can't answer, maybe Stan or Michael can. And if we can't answer them, we will get you the answer. Because, again, we're a relatively small agency in terms of some of the folks that y'all deal with. But we want you to be informed, and we want you to know the effect it's going to have on our offices if we have further cuts.
Questions from the committee? If we have a quorum, I don't see any evidence of it, but I think we've got one question from Chairman Bearden.
You seem like you was looking for a question, so I'll ask one. And it's to go to the victim advocates in those areas that don't have them. Who handles the duty who handles those duties for circuits that do have them? Who takes up that slack?
The way those are funded, I'll give you an example in my circuit. We handle about 5,000 cases a year in my circuit. I've got 5 counties. We have 5 victim advocates. I'm lucky enough, I'm one of the 16 that has one of those. The other victim advocates are funded by a combination of 5% add-ons on the criminal cases and also with both the grant. I don't have anybody that's county funded. Some of the larger counties probably have some county money. You know, I can't stand up here and say that victim services aren't going to get delivered if you cut these 16 people, because 2/3 are doing it without any of them, and if you cut mine, I've still got 4. Will we do as good a job? Obviously not. We're not going to do as good a job with 4 as we do with 5. In this environment, it's not likely to me that the counties would come up and pick up that position. Maybe they will. But the truth is, we've got a lot of other victim advocates other than those 16.
Thank you, sir.
Floor Leader Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you just brought up a point I'm just curious about. You have one that's state funded and 4 that are county funded. Could it be?
None of them are county funded.
Or they're funded by other means.
Exactly.
Could you take your state funding and send it to a district that did not have one?
Well,
Move the personnel around into an area where the county or other funds are not available. Take your state funded one and move that. I know it's a person, and I understand that. But, instead of having counties who may or may not have one, you've got 5.
I don't think there's anybody who doesn't have one. You have a victim advocate. There are only 16.
But you can put smaller, but you can take in where they're not as blessed as you are in yours.
Right. The way that these came out, we provided a list of the 16 counties that were awarded them. We thought that the fairest way to do that was to ask for a request for proposals back in 2004. We knew we were going to have 10 openings at that point. Mm-hmm. We submitted them, and there were some DAs and some PAC staff looked at them blindly without knowing who the circuits were, and they ranked them just like a grant application, because at the time we thought everybody was going to get one.
Right.
But if you don't take away the funding, or if you're asking would an individual DA give up his victim advocate to go to a poorer circuit, I can't answer for everybody, but I will tell you standing here that I would do that if they showed that they had a greater need than my office.
Or could you do it? Since there has been a change in the program, do a relook at the allocation process.
Sure, we could.
Okay, just curious about that.
If we keep those, we certainly could. Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Let me ask you this. If and I think you've sort of alluded to this, but if there were a cut to the PAC and you had to pick where that cut would come from, is that where it would come from? I know you don't want to lose the advocates, but if you had to pick, is that?
If the question is if we have to lay off somebody, the answer definitely is yes. We lay off the advocates because only a third of us have them.
Okay.
If the question is, do you want to continue furloughs to keep them on board? That's an issue, that the DAs would have to discuss and see. Are we willing to keep making that sacrifice to keep them on if there's not enough money in the state budget to fund them?
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Court of Appeals.
I'll have to talk to him about it. I want to make sure that he doesn't do that just willy-nilly. I want it legitimate.
May it please the committee, I'm John Ellington with the Court of Appeals. We had a lawyer plaintiff that put up their side of the case one day, and the judge said, "I think I agree with you." And then the defense put up their side of the case, and the judge said, "I think I agree with you." And then the bailiff went back there in the chambers, and the judge was scratching his head, and the bailiff said, "The judge, they both can't be right." He said, "I think I agree with you." And so what happens is we all can't always be right, and that's why we have appellate courts. And in this state, we have two appellate courts. We have the Court of Appeals and we have the Supreme Court, and the goal is to get it right. But I tell you that not only because it addresses what we do, but because it also addresses what you do. And you have a difficult decision. We understand that these are tough times, tough economic times, but the goal is to get it right. And we certainly hope that for justice to prevail in this state, that you will get it right. I'm proud to represent the Court of Appeals with you today. Our court was created in 1906 with 3 judges. Today we have 12 judges at the Court of Appeals. I think we got 6 in 1916, 9 in 1961, and then Zell Miller tried to get us 13 in 1996, but was unsuccessful. They finally got 10, thought that would help, but you really needed to be able to divide by 4, have another panel. So finally in 1999, we got our 4th panel. But I tell you all that because in 1983, and I think Alan might have been here, but Gerald, probably you were here, but in 1983, we got a 3rd staff attorney for each judge. Now, the reason for that 3rd staff attorney was to avoid creating new judgeships and to avoid trying to have another panel, which was increased costs across the board. So you need a little history lesson, but let me also share with you that states our size, Michigan, for example, they have 28 Court of Appeals judges. Florida, which is about double our size, they have 55. Louisiana, which is smaller than us, has about 55. So we are already short with judges at the Court of Appeals before we even get started talking about our caseload that we have to deal with today. All we do is decide cases and write opinions. And that's one of the reasons I brought to you today my visual aid, just to show you just for a second. But according to the...
Excuse me, are you going to introduce that into evidence?
I've already marked them. Should have given them to the clerk. Ask you if you can recognize these. That might be a good question. But anyway, we have an objection, I understand. But this represents, there's 1,000 pages in each one of these volumes. This represents a caseload, which is a normal caseload that is recommended standards nationwide in a year. This is a caseload. These next 2 volumes, understaffed at the Supreme Court. Now then, in addition to that, we have to deal with a lot of applications, discretionaries and interlocutories. I think we have around 800 of those that we have to deal with each year. Some of those will then turn into these opinions that you see here today. So we are overworked, understaffed. Our staffing levels today, we have 10 less employees than we did in 1999 when I came to the Court of Appeals. 10 less today. We only have 82 in all. Well, that's 10 less in the 12 years that I've been at the Court of Appeals. We have taken our cuts, just like everybody else in state government over the last few years. We understand that it's shared pain. We understand that we can't always get it right, and we know that y'all going to have to make some tough decisions. But we have some other things that have hit us. We had 3 new judges that came on board last year. 2 of these were by appointment. Governor Perdue appointed Keith Blackwell from Cobb County. He also appointed Stephen Dillard from Macon. And then there was an election, Christopher McFadden, to fill Ed Johnson's seat. So we got 3 brand new baby judges over there last year. All of that requires new expense, requires GBA expenses and training expenses that we've had to incorporate into our budget. We've lost, over 2 years ago, we lost 11 employees. We have been furloughing. We furloughed, I think, 7 days last year, 4 days this year already, and 5 more scheduled for the rest of the year. So you can see that we've been doing all of this work with less employees, and I think that's going to be a broken record. You're going to be hearing that over and over. I've joked that we've been doing more and more with less, and finally we had reached the point where we were going to have to do less with less. But that's not an option in our business. We don't have any control over a number of these appeals that are filed. And I can tell you that the number it's been basically stable for about the last 4 or 5 years, which is a good thing. But we are now seeing an explosion in cases because of the economy. We're also seeing a huge number of pro se cases where folks are representing themselves. That creates a big strain on our central staff. Well, our central staff has already been decimated. We had 10 folks in there at one time. Now we've only got 5. They do triage. They look at cases for jurisdictional issues to see if they're even filed in the right place, to see if they belong in our court. And as these pro se folks represent themselves, many times they don't get it right. They don't belong with us. They should be somewhere else. So we have to have our central staff to do triage. If they don't, then it bubbles up to a judge's chambers, which is already understaffed, and so it creates more problems with our court. Now then, I did want to address briefly the 4% that I think y'all had asked us to address earlier in some memo. Anyway, what would happen if 4% equals $501,000 in our budget? 4% is $501,274. If we were to take a $501,000 reduction for the rest of this year, if we did away with all of our central staff attorneys, that's only $308,000. 4% would just wipe out our central staff. 4% would also wipe out our clerk's office. If we shut down the clerk's office, I think it's $328,000. So we are not really in a position to take any reduction, but 4% I think would pretty much wipe us out as far as central staff and as far as our clerk's office goes. Have you got any questions?
Questions from the committee? I have one, or maybe 2. The clerks are assigned to the judges and do legal research, help them write opinions, etc.
Yes.
What about the administrative assistants? What do they do?
All of our each judge has one administrative assistant. We have 12 of those, and in addition to doing general secretarial work and answering the phone and dealing with attorneys and things like that, they are responsible for putting all of the opinions together. There's a tremendous amount of paperwork that still goes on today. Now we're trying to go to electronic filing and that sort of thing, but if you would come over, this cart right here is not just a cart, it's a special cart. And usually they're filled up and stacked up with papers on the top and the bottom that roll up and down the halls. Those those AAs are responsible for transferring the cases from one judge's office to another judge's office, back and forth to the clerk's office, which is now over in the health building. But they are constantly in motion trying to put together all of these cases for circulation from one judge's office to the next judge's office and keeping track of all of the dockets.
All right, so we've got one administrative assistant to each judge.
That is correct.
What about the floating AAs?
We have 2 floating AAs. Right now they're assigned to the clerk's office because we're short-staffed in there. If you'll remember last year, Bill Martin, our clerk of court, who'd been there for a long time, retired. He had an assistant, Holly Sparrow, who's with me today. Holly is now our clerk and our assistant. She's short-handed, and one of the floating AAs is usually assigned to the chief judge. I don't have that. I put her back in the clerk's office because they're short-handed there. The other floating AA now is training the AAs for these new three new judges, and you have to have one floating AA so that they can, when people are out, vacations, surgeries, pregnancies, that sort of thing, that person floats so that they can keep the work of the court going.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Chairman Powell. To my friend, do you now have a new title? Is that Chief Judge? Did I hear that correctly?
You didn't hear that from me, but that is correct.
You are the Chief Judge, and how do you get this title?
I think by breathing. If you stay on the court long enough, sooner or later you'll get seniority, and that's where I'm at now.
You made mention about the new judges, the baby judges. So as the Chief Judge, are you hands-on in trying to get these folks trained?
Well, I have some responsibility in that, yes, sir. I don't know what.
So then obviously we could probably save some money if we transferred that duty to someone else to train them.
I think it would go a lot quicker.
Mr. Chairman, I want to have a little bit of fun with my old friend there, since he had to make a reference about how long I've been over here. But I also remember he's the one who stole one of the best secretaries I ever had a few years ago.
She's one of these administrative assistants that Mr. Powell, Chairman Powell, was talking about.
Can you tell
Do you
us,
think if we cut their budget, you might get her back?
No. Well, I thought about that a few years ago, but you know, she has done so well trying to look after the Chief Judge over here. In all seriousness, I mean, I think most of the members, especially the ones that's been on this committee for a while, that we saw a trend or a period of time in history over the last several years that the budgets were not exactly fair and equal in how things were treated, and the judiciary had taken, I think, an unsizable lump. Would that be your opinion?
That would be my opinion. I will tell you this. When I first started, there's been several references to the health building. I was one of the new baby judges that came on board back in 1999, and I was in the basement of the health building. And I stayed over there for about 6 or 7 years until the ceiling finally collapsed. Judge Charlie Michael and I were there, and we would cover our desk every night with a tarp. Our kid Charlie, he's an aristocrat from Savannah, and he had a nice blue, Neiman Marcus top, and I had some trailer trash plastic from Soperton. But every night we would cover our desk because the ceiling would cave in and water would come down. Finally, we wound up getting moved to the Equitable building. I was over there for 2 years while y'all did some renovation, moved our clerk's office from the 3rd floor to the 5th floor. And if you look at your budgets around 2007, 2008, you'll see an increase in our budget. But that was simply to get us the space that we should have had in 1997 and 98. And now we have to pay rent on that space, but our clerk's office is over on the 5th floor in the health building. And we have 3 judges now on the 3rd floor of the judicial building. But we've been cramped for space. We're in a building over here that was built in 1955 for 6 judges with 2 clerks each. Now we've got 12 judges with 3 clerks each. So we have about 48 people where 22 or 3 people were supposed to be over on the 4th and 5th floor of the judicial building. And so we're out of space. We're on top of each other. And I will tell you this, Alan, we had one clerk. You asked about these law clerks. We had him in an office, we called it. It was a closet. There was an electrical panel in there, and OSHA made us come in and get him out because they thought he was going to glow in the dark. And so we've been cramped. We've been had unsuitable space. But the real, at the end of the day, this shows you what we do at the Court of Appeals. Our main meat is these opinions, and this is what we technology. If we didn't have our IT department and the technology that we have for research and writing online, there's no way we could keep up. We have a 2-term rule. When a case is filed, it's got to be out within 2 terms of court. We have 3 terms of court a year: April, July, and December. So once a case is filed, it's going to be out under our Constitution within 2 terms, or it's affirmed by operation of law. That's never happened in 104 years now. We've always met our deadlines. It's kind of like y'all's session. We're down there the last week of court to midnight trying to get those cases out. It's kind of like the drop-dead deadline you have. I tell folks that our first term used to mirror what y'all did over here, kind of get out late March, early April, and then y'all don't know when to go home. But, we all used to go home to plant, but, nobody farms anymore. But our first session gets through in April, and then July, and then December. But the only thing that's helped us to keep up is the technology. And one other thing that I want all of you to know that you can be very proud of in your own community and in your own district. We have great judges. I think somebody's here with Superior Courts today. We have great judges and great lawyers in this state. And without the quality of the work that they do, there'd be no way that we could keep up. Now, I can tell you in Hartwell and Cuthbert and Camilla and Jonesboro, you've got good lawyers and you've got good judges. And that's the only thing that helps us keep up here at the Court of Appeals of Georgia. Thank y'all.
Well, I hadn't quite finished asking a couple more questions.
Well, I'll be glad to take your next one. I'll ask Janie.
You might run the show over to the other house, but
Allen reminded Gainesville got pretty good ones.
And Hall County has some pretty good attorneys
Gainesville has
too.
great judges. Bonnie
let's
Oliver,
not be
Kathy
remiss.
Gosling.
If I might ask, a issue of concern that we've had the last few years is the conditions over in the court, over in the judicial building. Office equipment, the basic, what we consider and take for granted is the necessities of doing business. A few years ago, y'all didn't have anything, and I keep hearing that maybe in some of the courts that they don't have the proper equipment and such. They have to pull it out of their pockets to keep things running. Can you brief us a little bit about y'all's condition?
Well, right now, we're not complaining. The ceiling's not falling down on my head. I will tell you this, though. I just moved to what I consider one of the new offices. It's on the 3rd floor. One of my staff members went and bought a filter and duct taped it over her vent, and in a week it was black. We don't have drinking water that we can drink over there. We have to bring in our own water. And so the conditions that we're working in are actually deplorable. I will say this, and I'm running late for another meeting, but this one takes precedence, I can assure you. We do have a building and construction committee meeting going on now that somebody's funded a study to do for a new judicial building. They tell me that this building over here was a very nice building in 1955, state of the art. We're very proud of it. But it is essentially an office building with a courtroom in it. It's not a courthouse. And so hopefully in this next generation, whenever the economy changes and we do get some money, we can construct a new judicial building that is a Supreme Court courtroom and Supreme Court of Appeals courthouse. But our building conditions, our work conditions, and the equipment we have is antiquated. We recognize that it's a tough budget situation. We're trying to complete our e-filing docket. We have not been able to do that yet. We'll just wait till the money shows up. They got good lawyers and judges in Ringo, too.
So it would probably be, given what you're saying, the describing conditions in the building over there, then maybe they need to make room for y'all at the Forsyth South campus where they have nice new facilities.
If you want to move it closer to Soperton, I'm all for it.
No.
Thank you, Judge. We will have probably some additional hearings when we get into the 12 budget, and we will ask you to come back for segment 2 of Saturday Night Live at that time.
I look forward to it. May I be excused?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
You'd be impressed.
Superior Courts.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Kathy Goslin, and I am a Superior Court judge in Hall County, where Representative Collins is from. I don't like following Judge Ellington. It's really, I can't really follow it like he does, so you're going to get our presentation with a little less humor, I think. Charles Miller, our budget administrator, is here, as is Sandy Lee, our executive director. And Charles gave you several things. One is what we would do with a 4% reduction, and we'll talk about that in a second. We also gave you detailed accounting of what each of the administrative positions in the council office does, as well as a detailed list of what the district court administrators throughout the state does. So you can have some ideas about those administrative positions. As you know, our budget is 3 main categories: district court administrators, the council office, and then the judiciary, the judges and their secretaries and law clerks. The operating budget for the judicial administrative districts in the last 3 years has been reduced by 52%. The council office has been reduced from 15 folks to 11, and that is at the level that they had in 1995, 11 staff people. We have cut travel and by 37%. We've reduced some law clerks. We don't have any room left in operating to cut, so what you'll see are furloughs, because that's the only real way we have to make some of the cuts. We understand how tight the economy is, and we do want to show you that we understand that. And one of the ways we've done that this year is that all the judges in the circuits that qualified for a new judgeship, and there were at least 7 of those circuits that qualified for a new judgeship, have agreed not to ask for a new judgeship, understanding how tight money is. We also want to remind you that the legislation that you passed last year to increase filing fees has added $17.3 million, approximately $17.3 million so far this fiscal year. So that has been added to the state budget. I don't have a cart and books and things to show you. I can tell you, however, that all those books that Judge Ellington showed you were made up of cases that originated, or most of them, in Superior Court. That 445,000 cases were filed in Superior Courts in 2009. We don't have the 2010 figures yet. So we are very busy. On the budget, let me point out a few things. It says reduce funds under the Superior Court judge's part. Reduce funds for 3 vacant law clerk positions. Actually, there have been 2 more that have left since September 1st, and so those are vacant as well.
So is that now 5?
It is.
Okay.
It is. You see that we would have to reduce the money that you gave us last year for senior judges, which is a very good use of all of our tax dollars. And we would have to have 3 furlough days for the secretaries, law clerks, and court administrators. We would reduce those funds, those 5 funds for law clerk positions. We would change some payments from this year until next fiscal year that we could do one time. That's a one-time cut that we could do. And then there's a little bit of fringe cost money for the judgeships that were not funded immediately. If you look at the judicial administrative districts, which is the top, the only way they could come up with 4% decreases by 6 furlough days. And in the council office, there is one position, the paralegal position, that would be reduced the remaining part of this year, leaving those 11 positions. Are there any questions?
Questions from the committee? Representative Weldon.
Good afternoon, Judge. Thank you for coming here today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I want to, could you help me understand the grants that have been applied for by the judicial administrative districts? And I'm just not familiar with that in my district.
Okay. And Greg Jones is here, who's the 3rd District Court Administrator, and I think he can directly answer that question.
Yes, sir. A lot of the grants that this past year.
If you'll get it a little bit closer to the microphone, please.
This past year, for example, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council of Georgia, it was responsible for the administration of statewide grants from the feds. Those were actually divided up on a circuit basis. It was a little unusual; never been done like that before. So you had to each circuit had to apply for this stimulus grant. One of the things that the DCAs did was we got directly involved because we do know the circuits, we know all the players in the circuits. So we assisted in coordinating and writing a good many of those grants, which totaled millions of dollars. Additionally, district court administrators are involved when we've got drug courts, mental health programs, things such as that. We're constantly looking through to see what grants become available at what times, whether or not they apply, and if they do, then we write grants and we administer the funds for those types of programs.
Could I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly.
So this when the grant money comes in, it comes into the administrative office of the courts.
No, we really are not really affiliated with the administrative office of the courts. I mean,
okay.
I work directly for 17 judges in my district. Judge Goslin, the court administrator in the 9th District, works solely for those judges. We are really staff to the 205 Superior Court judges, but we are staff to our specific district judges.
Okay. Now, how does that money, has it been that we got from stimulus funds, is that reflected in the budget that we have here that you provided us?
All that money was not judicially allocated. It was to be applied for boundary-wise by circuits. But, for example, we had police departments, we had law enforcement, we had children's rights groups. It was a community grant. But in a lot of cases, when you start bringing people like that together, the city and the county sometimes tend to want to worry about, well, I don't want the city in charge of this grant. The county goes, I don't want the city in charge. We come in a lot of those situations as pretty much neutrals. And so this was not so much a judicial grant as it was just for any agency in a judicial circuit. Now, the other grants, for example, drug court grants, things like that, those are used to fund local programs, not statewide programs, but local drug court and mental health programs that exist in several of the circuits throughout the state.
Okay. I think I'm in the 9th District, but I could be wrong on that because redistricting and that. In my district, are
you in Ringgold?
Yes, ma'am.
I think maybe that's the 7th.
Okay. I'm thinking congressional districts.
It's the old congressional districts back in 1975 when the DCA positions were created, which our numbers are the same as they were then, by the way.
Okay. Can you help me understand how that 7th Judicial District, I just don't understand how it worked very well. And I just like some guidance on how that works to benefit my judges there and the circuits there in the 7th Judicial District.
Sure. When you've got a judge in your circuit, there's basically that one judge and the one secretary. There is one law clerk in your circuit, but basically the staff really is one judge and one secretary. That's it. We're the rest of their staff. In your office or wherever you work, if your computer crashes, you call your secretary and you assume she's going to take care of it. If you're a judge and your computer crashes or your secretary's computer crashes, we're the ones they call. When it's time to renovate or build a courthouse, we're the experts that come in and tell you and remind the engineers that this sound system may sound great, but unless it's tied in through an amplifier and a splitter and sends the same signal off to the court recording equipment, you haven't got a good sound system. The audio-visual equipment, we select, direct the purchases and the installation and the placement of anything in a courtroom. Sound systems, lighting systems, evidence presentation systems. We're the ones that come in if you've got to renovate a courthouse that's 75 years old. I've been involved in 2 of those within the last couple of years. You know, there's so many things that you can do with a new courthouse. You've got to understand the space flow about public judges and the security of the inmates. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I mean, just to interrupt for one thing. So it's very difficult to understand how this works because it's different across the state. The 7th Judicial Administrative District, which is where you are, is made up of a number of different circuits. Douglas County, Greg's got a handout about that. So it's made up of a number of different circuits. And district court administrators cover that whole judicial administrative district. They may do something completely different in one circuit than they do in another circuit. And the DCAs that are in circuits that are, you know, have a vast amount of area to cover, which that one does, as a matter of fact, have to travel and do things for rural circuits that, for instance, the district court administrator in Fulton or Stone Mountain don't have to do. So there are wide differences in what happens depending on where somebody is.
Okay. Now, am I right in saying that the mediation is dealt with by the 7th Judicial District?
Yes.
In my district?
You are.
Okay, and that's how it is throughout the state?
Yes. All the ADR programs are handled through the district court administrator's purview,
Okay.
sort of.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
One question, in the proposal that the Superior Courts have made, there is a proposal that the fringe costs for a vacant judgeship in July and August be reduced. Would you explain that to me, please?
Charles?
Those are the Griffin judgeships that didn't get sworn in until October.
Okay. Two judgeships in Griffin that were vacant and were not sworn in until October. And so the fringe benefit costs would not have to be paid for those 2 positions. So we could reduce the fringe benefit cost total.
Okay. So basically it was something where the position was vacant during
Yes.
that period of time?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any questions from any other members of the committee? Judge, we're probably going to be making our recommendations for the 11 amended. Quite frankly, I don't think that we feel the need to take y'all's offer of the senior judge money.
Great.
You need it.
We do.
I also don't think that we were probably inclined to take the deferral of payments, because all that is just postponing the inevitable into another bad budget year. So, but anyway, so I mean, it's going to have to be dealt with sooner or later.
Yes.
But dealing with the senior judge issue, would you explain to us a little bit about how those are allocated? I mean, since they are limited,
They are.
you only need to use them in emergencies.
Emergencies and recusals are the highest use of senior judges. We used to use them more in circuits that were overly busy, but we've had to limit what we've used them for. We set aside a certain amount because we were worried about budget cuts. The other amount is cut into 2 sections, one for emergency use, and that is decided on by our executive committee meeting. They get an emergency request from somebody. Somebody goes in the hospital. We had 2 judges fall off ladders, I think. So, and they were in the hospital. We don't want to say that.
Hazardous occupation.
It is a hazardous occupation. And so they were in the hospital and they were out unexpectedly, and people couldn't cover trial weeks that they had covered, so that money was used for that. Recusal cases that recuse a whole circuit and have to go somewhere else. So we had emergency money, and then we have money that we just allocate out to all the districts per judge, and that those districts then decide how they're going to use that money best.
Okay, but there is some oversight either from the district or from the council?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Public safety.
Well, I always appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak about budget issues, and I'm not going to go into a long dissertation
I
about...
think it's the other mic that's live.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I mean, you might want to tap it and see, but yeah.
Working fine. I always appreciate the opportunity to come and speak about the status of our department and appropriations, and I'm not going to go into any long dissertation like some of the others. However, I do have to say that as I heard Judge Ellington speak, I thought there for a moment that we could substitute the Department of Public Safety for the Court of Appeals. In fact, we haven't been able to drink the water in our headquarters building for 20 years due to lead contamination. And the only difference is that our roof is falling in, and if we don't get out of there in a couple of years, we're going to have some significant problems because the fire marshal told us if he has to come again, he's going to condemn the building. We also have a lot of empty spaces in the building because we've had attrition for administrative personnel, and we have a lot of vacant offices as a result of those people leaving and not being replaced. Now, if you look at the budget, I have two prime items that I wanted to speak to. The first is there's an error there in GTA. I think that's been discussed at length by another agency. That's about $200,000 from our part. We don't care who made the error, but we would certainly appreciate the money back. The other item is with regard to the Motor Carrier Compliance Division, the addition of money. I think I went into a pretty good explanation of what's going on there during the Joint Appropriations Committee, and essentially what it is we've developed a new position that is about 1/3 of the cost of a post-certified officer 2 years ago and got it past the legislature. And what we've come under some pretty significant pressure from the Federal Department of Transportation and the State Department of Transportation about our inability to weigh sufficient numbers of trucks. And what's happened is, and I go back to 1999 because that's when an operational audit was done of this organization when it belonged to the Department of Transportation. And essentially they got to keep all the money. They got to keep the fine money, they got to keep the motor fuel money, they got to keep the permitting money, and they had right at $20 million a year to operate. And our current status, we get about $6 million to do the same thing. So they had 275 people weighing trucks, and they were bringing in a significant amount of money because with the fines, which they got to keep. Now we've dropped down to approximately 75, and we are only able to keep the weigh stations open for one shift a day across the state. We have 19 permanent weigh stations. The law was changed in 2001. Now all that money goes into the general fund. We don't get to keep any of it. We get a little bit of the permitting money and a contractual agreement with the Department of Transportation, but our funding is significantly less. The DOT personnel were cut our money off twice because we were weighing an insufficient number of trucks according to their statistical data. And what's been proposed by the governor here is to add $482,000 in the amended budget to hire some weight masters who are civilian administrative personnel, which are pretty much the same as meter maids or code enforcement officers. This is an administrative process. They weigh the trucks. They weigh a certain amount. The law says that a certain amount's allowable. They go, if they wish to contest it, it goes before a administrative law judge in lieu of a criminal case. So we can do that. We can save a significant amount of money, and it's our belief that for every $2 that we spend here, we'll put an extra $1 into the state coffers. The caveat there is that it also protects the infrastructure in the state, and that the roads aren't damaged as significantly as they would be if it was left unchecked. The other part of that is there's a lot of money that goes into permitting, and you can get a permit to run overweight. You have to pay a certain amount of money. You can get a one-trip load, a monthly load, or an annual load permit, but it's our belief that a lot of people with overweight trucks are running the gauntlet now because they know that we're out one shift a day, 5 days a week. If we get this money, we can run 2 shifts a day and run it through the weekends. It's a substantial reduction in actual personnel costs with the post-certified officer versus the weight masters. The only other issue I'd like to discuss is gas. I talked about that at the Joint Appropriations Committee. Right now, we're about $50,000 a month short on gas. We furloughed everybody a day a month last year, and at the end of the year, we had $400,000 money left over in our gas account. That was taken away because we didn't need it. We lost about 8,000 patrols, 8-hour patrols. We've cut our people back and tried to limit them in the number of miles or the use of fuel. And I'm told in our last month the troopers now are averaging 100 miles of patrol, which they're doing a lot of stationary work. They're doing road checks and running stationary radar. And previously they averaged between 180 and 250 miles of patrol. We still respond to all calls, but going back to Mr. Ellington, he identified Michigan, Florida, Louisiana as the number of people that they had in their states on the appellate court judges. In Michigan, there are 2,500 troopers, Florida 1,800, Louisiana 1,100, and Georgia we have 788. And now all those states are smaller than us except Florida. So, and that's essentially all I have, unless as you'll see here, attrition is the basic 4% reduction here. It's about $2.5 million. We've lost a significant number of people over the last 3 years. I didn't go into it. One of the things that we've done that, I had to figure a way to make the budget work a couple of years ago. We've not promoted a person in our agency in any capacity since August of 2008. We started to move people around now. We just had to move a fellow right outside of Savannah the other day to Brunswick because we didn't have any supervisors in the Brunswick post, and that's going to be more and more difficult as time goes along. We don't have some captains around. We have vacancies in troops. We don't have a lot of posts where we don't have post commanders. We don't have a human resources director. I don't have an executive assistant. We don't have a deputy commissioner. His executive assistant position is gone. We used to have 6 people in planning. Now we have 1. And it just goes on and on throughout our agency.
Questions from the committee? Representative Weldon.
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
I just want to follow up on an issue. Could you tell us the amount of revenue that each road officer produces?
Are you talking about troopers or motor carriers?
Troopers.
No, I couldn't. And I can give a good explanation for that. When we had driver services in our agency, we used to calculate that, because when citations were administered through the courts, they came back through us, and we processed them and sent them to our headquarters so that they went into the records. Now driver services maintains all those records, and they have no interest in calculating the amount of money that goes into the courts as a result of what we do. So we can go back to 2001 or so and get the records that were in effect then. But I think that's pretty outdated.
So I need to go back to the counties and try to figure that out?
No, I don't think you could even get that data. I don't think it would show us, except maybe in Fulton County here with our motorcycle unit, because that money is kept separate. But in the rest of the counties, I think that money all goes into the county fund.
Thank you.
Any other questions? A couple. Not to maybe get to the level that you were before. And certainly we'll probably have this discussion again when we get into the 12. But what amount would your budget have to be increased to provide adequate fuel for the balance of this fiscal year?
I would think, $50,000 a month.
3 months left.
Yeah, so 150,000 would. I tell you how bad it's gotten. The sheriffs have been putting fuel in some of our cars, and
don't discourage them from doing that.
I'm not. The Bullitt County Commission gave us a donation of $2,500 for fuel for the cars in Statesboro the other day. So. And you can understand, based on the previous question, why there would be some interest.
It's an investment. Explain to us the issue of trooper attrition. I mean, we see that we are cutting costs by trooper attrition, and then we are having a new school to put on new troopers, and that's sort of confusing.
Well, trooper attrition generally is people who retire, die, or seek employment elsewhere, or are terminated. And we typically lose about 40, 45 a year. So in order to maintain whatever level we're going to be at, we have to train that many. And it's a tough process. And I think the school before last, we had 950 applicants, and we cut it down through the background investigations and lie detector tests to about 90. We started the school with 90. We ended up with 42. So when you start taking populations of citizens that are interested in this from 950 and you only get 42, it's a tough process in itself. But we're typically going to lose that many people for a variety of reasons every year.
But I guess my question is, are we going to leave those positions vacant for a period of time before we replace them? Because I would think that would be a normal process as far as we lose folks, we replace them, and unless we're leaving a position vacant, I question why we are showing attrition and then rehiring unless there is some goal to save some money in that process.
Well, the last school and this school were both federally funded. We've gotten federal burn grant funds to fund the trooper school and their salaries for 2 years. July the 1st, the last one expires. It's our belief that we're going to get another one that will start in April that will be federally funded that should carry us for 2 years again. So that money, the attrition money is from the people that preset that, but when the 2 years is up, we have to start funding them again.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? All right, wait a minute. Got Representative Powell.
Bill, let me ask you, what do y'all project as your attrition rate this coming year of retirees?
My guess is it's probably going to be about the same. It holds pretty true. It runs from 35 to 50 pretty much every year.
Hey, we've got a trooper school set up for this spring.
There's one supposed to start in April, based on the federal funding. We've already interviewed most of the applicants, and they're getting our all the process pretty well completed.
And that class will have how many?
Looks like it may start with about 70 now, which leads us to believe we probably have 35 or 40 that'll complete it.
So probably by this time next year we'll be in the negative factors, even lower.
Well, we've 5 or 6, 7 years ago we were at about 920, and now we're at 788 as of January 15th.
Chairman Burns.
Colonel, am I to understand and make sure I'm clear on it that the new civilian employees will be just in the weigh stations themselves?
That's correct. The only thing they'll do is weigh trucks. Now we typically have 2 or 3 people there at a time just for safety's sake, and we do federal inspections. You have to be a post-certified officer to do that, or if you want to arrest somebody. So we're going to have 1 or 2 post-certified officers that are going to be there at the weigh station. But we found through the years that when they're unobstructed by other duties, they weigh a lot more trucks, and very obviously there are a lot more fines. So when they're called off to do other things, if we have an administrative person that's going to sit there, because we do it with cadets that we train to be motor carrier officers, they just sit there and they weigh trucks all day, and it's much more efficient, plus it costs less.
What's the number of counties your skirt teams cover typically?
159.
I mean,
each
in the region?
Well, we got 5 regions, so it's pretty. I don't know the exact breakdown, but roughly 20% of each one of them covers about. I know the one that we're in is covers everything from Brunswick to Augusta.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many people do you have working on your skirt team?
43.
And are all those crash reconstructionists?
Yes, they are.
Have you had any attrition in that area?
We try to keep that full as best we can because there's a demand. I mean, they have a backlog right now. And I say, you know, before we did this, the thing that impresses me about SCIRT is they've got a 99% conviction rate when we take a prosecutorial case to court. They do such a good job with, and it takes them 4, 5, 6 months sometimes to put the case together, but it's very complete, comprehensive, and as a result, we get good results. And you know, I think our citizens are well served when you lose a family member to a traffic accident, a fatality, and you get what you deem to be justice.
I want to thank you for maintaining that SCIRT team. I think that's a great service to the state.
Thank
you. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I understand that we have some attached agencies here. Public Safety Training Center. Any comments?
No, sir. Just happy to be here, Mr. Chairman.
Aren't we all?
And I'll make mine very quick, Mr. Chairman. The usual stuff, the just workers' comp, the telecommunication, we're not transferring to oversight the burn buildings. We're actually just not filling that position right now. There's 12 regional burn buildings throughout the state. We have to oversee those, and we're not going to turn those over to the locals. Although the locals use them, we still oversee them just for safety. The replacing state funds 3812.4 with tuition charged to students repeating the class due to a failure. We've never actually charged before for folks coming back. If they fail instructor training and they come back, we haven't been charging them. There's potential, it looks like, for about $32,500 to bring in tuition from that. The truth is that if your sheriff or chief has somebody fail one of our classes, they're not going to send that same person back if they have to pay tuition. They'll end up sending somebody else. So that number probably will never be generated. Because you figure if Carlton Powell down in Thomasville has one that fails, he won't be coming back. He may send somebody else. He ain't going to send that one. The replacing state funds with federal other funds on the coroner's training salary, and we're going to use the NIMS funds to do that, National Incident Management System funds. We teach those classes routinely. The federal government actually, through GEMA, pays us to teach those classes, and that's revenue generated that we can offset some salary with. The last one is the biggest cut for us in the 518,324 total is going to be, actually it's a total of 5 positions. Now, we've been able to hold those open, and we've not filled those because we knew that budget cuts were probably coming. Now, the biggest thing, and I know this is just about 11, but I need to go ahead and tell you, you're going to get calls probably from the Augusta area. I was over there yesterday and met with their advisory board. Each of the regional police academies has an advisory board. We're going to have to end up probably in 12 if the numbers hold the same with over $800,000 cuts in 12. We're going to end up having to close a couple of regional academies. And one of those is probably going to be Augusta. And we're doing that based upon a business model, how much it costs to actually do the training per training dollar. And because they have such a low student load, they're one of the highest training dollars that we have. So just a heads up, and I'm not trying to get into 12, but you're probably going to get some calls.
Actually, they've already started.
Have they started?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But would ask you when we get to that point,
sure,
if you would factor into your business model the cost for the local law enforcement to send somebody to Forsyth or wherever it may
sure.
be, with the attendant transportation cost and lodging cost or whatever it may be, so that we get a total big picture of, are we cutting state cost and basically transferring that to the locals, or are we really realizing savings across the board?
Mr. Chairman, I can probably answer that right now. There's no doubt we're transferring some of the cost to the locals. Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any other way to do that.
Well, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but what I would like to know is, are we cutting $500,000 and somebody else is spending $750,000?
Right.
I mean, is it really either a cost shift, or are we actually increasing costs, just not for the state? But we'll talk about that on
Sure.
another day, but
Sure.
I'd like to get a true picture of everybody's position on that when
understand.
we get there.
I understand.
We have a question. Is that Representative Powell?
You really want to, are you going to be speaking for the Firemen's Training Council too while you're up here today, or are they going to speak on their own?
Probably they're going to talk to you about 12. I don't think they're going to talk to you about 11, but I think they're going to talk to you about 12. Now, I'm going to do some speaking for them when it comes to 12.
So you'd probably be the one that could receive a question or two right now then?
I probably can answer, yes.
Right. I've been getting a lot of comments from my firemen, the agencies, the county and city fire departments, especially the county, where they run a lot of volunteer firemen.
Yes, sir.
And without going into a lot of specifics, they say there's an awful lot of changes that are being promulgated by the Safety Council. A lot of things there, a lot of more hoops they're supposed to be jumping through. This creating a lot of cost on the local counties. Could you address that?
Thank God, Representative Powell, I can address that, but I know somebody in the room that can. That's actually a firefighter standards and training question more than it is a training center question.
Cool.
It's a regulation question,
Point
not
that
a
gentleman out so he doesn't get away before.
Yes,
we
sir.
finish
He's right
today.
there. He's Lynn Purdue. Lynn Purdue would be the right one to talk to, sir.
Thank you.
Thank God.
Are any other questions regarding Public Safety Training Center?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone from Governor's Office of Highway Safety want to speak? Seeing none, anyone from Post want to speak? We have the Olympic bicyclist.
In that regard, I'm planning on taking a trip across the United States on a bicycle.
Are you coming back?
There's some people that probably wish they wouldn't, but yes, sir, I'm going to come back. I'm going to do that next year, but I'm training. When you're my size, you got to train a lot. For 11, Mr. Chairman, we're okay. We'll handle it with what we got. Thank y'all for allowing us to get our fees back. We'll make it on that for this year. 12's another story now, because y'all think we're going to do a whole lot better than we historically have done, but we'll do our best. But just suffice it to know that we've cut our full-time personnel to by 20%. We only have 8 investigators for the state of Georgia. There's some departments, some mid-sized police departments in this state have more investigators for the city and the county than we have for the state of Georgia. But we'll do our best with what we've got, and this is fair. 11, we're okay. So, but we're gonna have church when it comes to 12, if that's all right. And that's, unless y'all have any questions, that's all I have.
Representative Powell.
Since I'm waiting on the gentleman from the Fire Council to come up, let me ask you: has there been a lot of law enforcement guideline changes and such through Post?
The last big one we had, Representative Powell, was the eyewitness ID. But there's one coming in House Bill 87 with the immigration bill that I sure hope, it looks like an unfunded mandate today, but I sure hope y'all put some people and some money with it if you pass it, because we'll have to promulgate rules and model policies for law enforcement officers around the state that is really going to be labor and personnel and money intensive. But the last several years, thank y'all. Y'all really hadn't put a whole lot on.
So there hadn't been a lot of busy work as far as trying to
well,
promulgate new rules and regulations that carry these additional costs to the local.
That's correct. But one thing we got to keep in mind now, we have to update our curriculum ever so often. And we have asked the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council for a grant to look at those job task analysis, because they change every 5, 6, 8 years, and it's been about 9 years since we had one. So we're asking them for a grant to help us do another one to update our curriculum on into the future. So that's going on right now.
Would you say that right now the council, that they understand the burden that the state's under with the economy
Yes,
and
sir.
everything, and
Yes,
that they're
sir.
not just always looking for new ways of creating and
No, sir, we're looking for new ways to try to make money and offset some of these cuts and to provide a good law enforcement product for the officers in the state of Georgia. That's what we do.
Could you,
And
wait a minute, you just said something of ways of making money?
yes, sir. Through our fees that y'all gave us the ability to do last year, a bad police officer has to pay to try to get back into the system if they avail themselves of the process. I just don't think that good taxpayers of Georgia need to be paying for bad police officers to use the state of Georgia system. And so when I got there several years ago, we started doing that, and it went away for about 9 months. Y'all gave it back to us, and we want to be reasonable, but we want the expense to go where the expense needs to go.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jim.
We'll see you when we talk about 12. Firefighter Standard and Training Council.
Sir, I actually have another meeting I need to.
No. No. Representative Powell has been sharpening his pencil.
Yes, I understand. Our AFY 11 budget is pretty straightforward. We also are a small agency. During this budget year, we have laid off a staff person, which is 10% of our workforce, and everyone has taken 13 furlough days. So that's where we're at now. And that pretty much takes care of our budget that we're currently under. To give you a little insight, we've been cut 27.4% since fiscal year 8. There are 644 fire departments in the state of Georgia and 30,000 firefighters. Now, with our evaluation division, we will test 10,000 firefighters a year, and that's written tests. And we will give 8,000 skills tests or hands-on tests every year. And we've already worked it out that we try to put our feet on the real estate, try to visit every fire department every 2 years. We've done that in the last 2 years. And the reason for this is to offer customer service, to assure that these individuals meet the minimum requirements of statute and of rules, and to offer any assistance that we can. For the testing, we offer state certification. There are 5 levels of state certification, and we currently have 23 levels of national certification. And the way that we have looked at this to see our reducing budget, we've done a lot of work on our internet to allow fire departments to report, to submit various and assorted forms, to do end-of-year report, recertification reporting, and we've also done a lot of work with our regional testing. Would you like to give them a brief rundown on what you've done to save money? Okay. This is, forgive me, I'm Lynn Pardue, Director of Firefighter Standards and Training, and this is Chad Cobb, one of our managers.
With the regional testing concept, there's 9 regional test sites across the state of Georgia. These regional test sites have helped print off written tests so that we wouldn't absorb that fee, because our reduced operating budget just didn't allow it. And so they also administer the written test for us. And then they just mail the written test results back to us. We grade them and send out their scores by internet.
Now that pretty much takes care of how we're dealing with this budget year. Now, are there any questions budgetarily? And then I'll be glad to address your questions, sir. Okay.
You're on permanent.
Yeah, but let me ask you, and I'm sorry we let the guy with public safety. On item, we're reducing the budget on the training center. This may not be your question, but maybe you can give a little insight, because I'm sorry we let the other guy get away. Reducing funds $50,000 for transferring oversight of the regional burn program.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit about what that is and what the effects may be to that?
Representative Powell, this will be the regional burn programs that deal directly with the Georgia Public Safety Training Center. It will not be us. So this is a question that will need to be addressed by them.
All right. Secondly, you'd already heard my question.
Yes, sir.
And it's not just coming from me, but also my colleague from Hall County, and I think the gentleman from Cuthbert, and probably some others.
Sure.
And talking to some of my local fire chiefs and the such, and it seems to be more county-oriented, where they, have a lot of the volunteers type staffs, said that apparently there's a lot of rule changes that's been coming down as of late that's really creating a lot of heartburn, and they say it's creating a lot of extra expense on them. Could you address this?
I would be glad to, yes, sir. Our agency was created by law in 1974. Our rules were promulgated in 74 and became effective January the 1st, 1975. At that point in time, our administrative rules have not been updated. At that time also, when our agency was created, our responsibility was to certify full-time firefighters on fire departments that had 3 or more full-time firefighters. Now, that's what the rules were written toward. And since that time, our agency has assumed, by statute, the responsibility of certifying fire departments in 1995 to assuring that every firefighter has a minimum level of training, and that was tremendous, because and that happened July the 1st, 2004. Prior to that time, there were no minimum requirements for volunteer firefighters. They could be a firefighter and go into an extremely hazardous environment with 0 training. So we assumed that responsibility in 2004. So there's been, and also in 2004, we added 4 additional state certifications. So we certify firefighter, fire and life safety educator, fire inspector, fire investigator, and airport firefighter, and then 23 levels of national certification. So as you can see, since the time that our rules were promulgated in 1975, they're way outdated. So we're playing catch up. We put, over a year and a half ago, our council directed to have a committee put together of representatives from all over the state. We invited 34 fire chiefs and training officers from all over the state that are full-time, volunteer, part-time, combination departments. We invited 5 associations and 4 different state agencies. These individuals have been working for a year and a half. They're to the point that they think they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I hope it's not that train, because it has been a hard road. Things that we have seen some pushback on is requiring annual training for volunteers. The committee is looking at requiring 24 hours a year for each volunteer firefighter in the state of Georgia. Up until this time, if this passes, there is no annual training requirement by the state. So 24 hours a year, that's 2 hours a month. There are some other issues like this that individuals are really concerned about, legitimately concerned about, and then there's a good bit of misinformation out there. What I have done, Representative Powell, I have been to probably 13 or 14 regional meetings, town hall meetings, if you will, throughout the state, and we're glad to go to any place and talk to interested parties and answer questions. But these rules are not complete yet. When the Rules Committee gets through with them, they will submit them to our council. The council will do whatever they need to do with it, and then we'll go through the promulgation process. So when people come to you and say we're trying to put them out of business, that is honestly not true. We're trying to establish a minimum level of training for every firefighter in the state of Georgia. And it is a minimum. It's below the state average.
Before these rules become effective, there will be opportunity for fire departments, the public, to comment on those?
Absolutely. We plan on going above and beyond what Title 50 requires, and that being have more public hearings, have more discussion, and then offer the results of that back to our council. We are not about to pass these. The time frame is not there yet. We're just not to that point. The confusion is what really hurts. And please, individuals that talk to you, please direct them my way, because I would love to talk to them. Or tell them to set up a meeting, a town hall type meeting. We'll be glad to come talk to them.
I think that'd be a dandy idea. Maybe even get a few of them up here
Yeah,
when we start going over the 12 budget.
I'd be glad to.
Because the verbiage that I've gotten from some of these folks, and they didn't specify exactly what it was, but they said there's a lot of rule changes,
Yes, sir.
but not what they're considering expenses in the future, but things that they talk about now, unless I just misunderstood them when some of the folks were talking to me. And of course, right now, as we all know, given the situation our state's in, and it's not just state government budget, it's local budgets, and all of the different various levels of government that are all having to figure out how they're going to do with less.
We
right
understand
now.
that. The Rules Committee has taken that into effect. There are a lot of very sharp professionals on this committee. And these guys are taking this into consideration. The last thing that they want to do is establish unfunded mandates on these local departments. They have to have chicken queues in order to put fuel in their trucks. I mean, it happens, and it happens today in the state of Georgia. So, and one other thing, it's not engraved in stone. You know, it's not a one-time deal. This is just the first time we have done this as an agency in 35 years. So it's time. This is something new. And some of these non-specific things that are brought up ask for specifics, because we have the most current version on our website. The rules are there. We're not hiding anything. And point them our way. I'll be more than happy to talk to them.
No, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Baker.
Mr. Cobb, a while ago you were talking about testing. Is that in-house, or do you farm that out? Or?
We, prior to the 11 budget, we had money for per diem where we'd pay a proctor monitor to go out and administer the written test or the skills testing. But with the recent budget cuts, we lost that, and these regional test sites, they can do it at their location or go to a location to go to the department that's needing it. It might have 25 candidates there. Instead of them busing them over there, they'd go to that site. So it varies as far as whether it be in-house at that regional test site or a surrounding department that needs testing. They're virtually helping us make the test available, whether pro board or state.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pardons and paroles.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Michael Nell. I'm the Executive Director of the State Board of Pardons and Paroles. I just wanted to just briefly share with you the method we came up with our cuts that we submitted. We formed a budget reduction team across the agency and looked at every item and literally took serious every stone we could turn. We were down to actually looking at things as little as $600. But one thing I'm pleased to say is these cuts that were submitted do not impact our core mission, but they are things that we can live without, and we think that's the responsible thing to do. Just quickly here, of course, General James Donald is here. He's chair of the Pro Board here representing the Pro Board members. We have also Rita Rocker, who is our legislative liaison, and Steve Hayes, who's with our public affairs. And at this time, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Beth Oxford, who is our budget administrator, and she will walk through each one of the lines. When we're finished, we'll certainly entertain any questions you have.
Good afternoon. I'll be referring to page 62 on the tracking document, and I'll go over the line items. We have 4 program budgets in our agency, and each one of these programs reflects the statewide changes. But today oh, okay. I'm sorry. You got it? Is this better? Okay. Each one of our 4 programs reflects changes that are statewide changes. However, today I'm going to focus on the agency-specific recommendations. In our clemency decision program, we have one addition in the amount of $66,000. Those are 4 offender administration positions that transferred in to us on January 1st of this year from Department of Corrections. These are salaries reflected for half year. Next year in FY12 it'll be annualized. These positions, after careful consideration, are positions that will help gain efficiencies in the parole release process. I think Commissioner Owens talked to you about these yesterday, and I'll be glad to answer any questions at the conclusion about these positions or their function. Coming down to parole supervision, one of the items, the $12,000 cut, is for our ACA accreditation. We are one of the few agencies, paroling authorities in the nation who have been able to attain this accreditation. However, it's not mandatory for our core mission, and so therefore, because of the costs associated, we are going to go ahead and discontinue the formal affiliation with ACA. Now, in order to attain this, we had to put our policies and standards in place. We are in no way going to lower our standards or change our policies. We just won't have the formal oversight from the ACA, American Correctional Association. Next is the cut of $33,000, and that's for the relocation of the Gainesville Parole Office. Both in this year's budget and in FY12, you'll see a very aggressive attempt by our agency in corrections, working in conjunction with the State Properties Commission, to relocate and actually co-locate our offices in cities where we both have offices. The biggest cost savings for our agency, however, is to move into state-owned space. So in this fiscal year, actually on September 1st of last year, we were able to close our Gainesville Parole Office and move those staff into the Gainesville Day Reporting Center / Gainesville Probation Office. And I can talk about that further, but you'll see in our FY12 budget we have future plans. We also have several sites that we are looking to move together in commercially leased space. But from our perspective, to actually save money, this state-owned space is the most cost efficient. And as we look at commercial space, we are not going to look at space where there will be cost increases, only if it will be budget neutral or if there are budget savings. And then finally, in parole supervision, in the amount of $6,800, those are calculation savings that we have been able to realize. Every state has to be a member of the Interstate Commission for Adult Offender Supervision. They're kind of the governing body, if you will. Each year they assess every state dues based on the number of offenders and the number of transfers. They now have a computer system, so once they were able to get an accurate count of how many transfers and how many offenders that we actually have, we had been paying $13,000 per year for these annual dues, and our dues this year and forward dropped down to $6,600. So since we had been paying that money, we put this money on the table, the $6,800, for reduction. Also, the final one is the eliminate the external objective assessment center for the position of chief parole officer. Several years back, just as other state law enforcement and local law enforcement agencies have, we instituted an assessment center process where the University of Georgia came in and created for us an assessment center program where every year eligible applicants come before the assessment center. We bring in outside assessors from other law enforcement agencies, and they give us a list based on a number of skills, knowledge, and abilities, also on leadership attributes, the people in our agency who have applied who are the most likely or the most have the most potential for promotions into this position, which, as you know, our chief parole officers are some of our key leaders in our agency. That concludes my summary of the budget items listed on the tracking sheet, but we'll be glad to entertain any questions that you have at this time.
Questions from the committee? Chairman Bearden.
Going back to one comment made, the $33,000 savings.
Pull your mic up, please. Thank you. No, move a chair. That one
working.
works.
Excuse me while I get resituated. Where you had the $33,000 savings, you said you got more of these basically merging together in 2012. Can any of these be done in the 2011 budget for more cost savings?
Actually, I don't think they will be completed. The next one that is under construction is Rome. Then we're going to be moving to Dublin. Then we'll be moving to the Augusta area. But we're in the leases for this year, and so we would have to pay those even if we could move in earlier. But GDC Engineering is working on these, and we should be out by June 30th, but unfortunately not.
Okay, just let you folks know we appreciate the job they do.
Okay, I will.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, I want to ask a couple of questions. Go back and I'm going to rehash a little bit, but last year there was a certain bill that some of us were in opposition to.
Yes, sir.
It was trying to merge certain functions between pardon, paroles, and corrections. Some of us were successful in defeating that we quite frankly didn't think was the proper way to go, and some of us have been headstrong with the idea that we felt that probation services should be put over with parole, basically to link them together instead of the opposite. And since that time, I understand that there has been a lot of behind-the-scenes work that has been done that has shifted. Could you tell the committee a little bit about some of these things that's been shifted and that's been done in lieu of that?
I can, Representative Powell, and I certainly appreciate the question. There are a lot of things that are being done and accomplished that was actually the intent of the legislation. I think, quite honestly, this is probably a better way to go about doing it. Quite honestly, there would not be a need for legislation because of some of the things that we were doing. First thing we did, we formed interoperability committees, forming 8 committees that were comprised of probation leadership as well as parole leadership at the field level, the folks that are actually out there doing the job. Many of those, it ranges from training to reentry to supervision to office co-location, and they have submitted a list of 55 recommendations, joint recommendations. What I'm most pleased about this group is they understand that interoperability in and of itself is not good unless you improve your business process or can save money in doing it without compromising your mission. These groups have been meeting since September. They, in fact, provided a report out at a joint statewide probation chief and parole chief meeting 2 weeks ago with those recommendations, and we're moving forward with many of them.
Do you foresee any recommendations, and this, you may not be the one I see the Grand Chief has appeared in the building, but I'll ask you, and he may be the one I need to ask, but do you foresee that there might be some logical proposals for legislative changes this year? I mean, I understand what you're saying right now. Of course, y'all are circumventing the defeat of that bill last year, but I think everybody in good spirit, we had an understanding what needs to go forward.
Right, right.
But do you see that there's going to be any proposed or discussions? You know, quite frankly, I have taken a lot of, I have cause for a lot of optimism after listening to the proposals of the new governor.
Yes, sir.
When he came in and he was talking about the need for alternatives.
Absolutely.
And alternatives means it's time to get rid of some of these folks that we're paying the high cost of incarceration, because alternatives would work just as well. And
yes, sir, that's absolutely correct. And I don't think there is a need for legislation to come out of these. These are ideas that are generated that if there's simply a willingness to focus on what's not in the best interest of corrections, not in the best interest of parole, but what's in the best interest of the state of Georgia in reducing recidivism. That's the spirit in which these committees and these groups are going. At this time, there's been no indication that there's a need for any legislative mandate or introduction to achieve what they are setting out to do.
Just real quickly, Representative Powell, you and I had a conversation shortly after the defeat of the bill, and I think I recall you saying to me that there were probably some things in the bill that we need to get on with, not necessarily consolidating the two departments. There's no initiative to consolidate the two departments. What we've gotten from this experience is a lot more, as Michael has said, a lot more collegial effort, and yet at the same time with 55 different opportunities that are crafted by the parole and probation chiefs themselves. I think at the end of the day we're going to be much further ahead. So, but I'm delighted. I saw the governor's speech down in Savannah today. I don't know if you all have seen copies of it, but it talks to the things you and I used to talk about several years ago. And the Day Reporting Center's initiative is one of the things in high drug courts, a variety of alternative programs, and we are committed to that. And one of my reasons for being late this afternoon was I'm voting cases now that goes to the core of those people who are afraid of and those people who are mad at. We just cannot afford, as you know, to continue the business we've been doing. So
that's exactly right.
Representative Powell, if I may expound on that a little bit, our Coastal Strategic Intervention Program, where they have substance abuse treatment, intense substance abuse treatment for those low-level offenders, and that treatment carries over into the community for substance abuse. That's one way. That affords us the opportunity to create about 2,000 beds and turnover beds right there. Our specialized parole officers who are focusing specifically on mental health, sex offender supervision, as well as the substance abuse areas, the day reporting centers, the community impact programs. I will mention to you there is one piece of legislation that we will be looking. It has nothing to do with joint efforts, but right now parole officers do not have law enforcement powers. We are kind of hamstrung, if you will, in collaborating, whether it be probation or whether it be with other law enforcement agencies. And there are two provisions of that statute that we're seeking to remove. One requires that an extraordinary circumstance be in place, and that if you are granted that power, that it's only good for 30 days. When we work in a collaborative effort with local law enforcement and probation, we in essence can't participate. And we've been more of a take-take situation. This will allow us to be give. It'll allow us to provide assistance when requested to, and work under the agency or entity requesting the assistance. So I just didn't want to miss that opportunity. Right. But it's not anything directly related to joint efforts. It's just going to posture us to be more afforded to the opportunity to collaborate with other law enforcement entities and agencies.
I might ask further, Mr. Chairman, and I might like to say this for the benefit of the committee, and I spoke about my optimism of the new administration. They seem to be so much more forward-thinking as far as looking at the real problem, the things that the General and I had once talked about. Yes, sir. Before we got so consumed with how to layer bureaucracies and fix up old college campuses that drew a line between some of us over the years. But at the end of the day, and if I think I heard what the governor said, that gave me this optimism that it's time that we start doing away with a lot of those layers of bureaucracy, getting more back to the mainline spirit of administration. That's the reason I asked the question about if we were getting this interoperability of parole officers and probation officers, something that I was a proponent of before it was an issue, because this could be a savings and then get corrections back to what they once did, and that's be the housing facilitator for those that we're afraid of.
It absolutely can. And Representative Powell, I'll give you one classic example. Last 2 weeks ago when we presented the interoperability updates, one of the groups recommended that training for probation officers and parole officers be collapsed. There were things that probation training was doing that was very good. There were things that parole training was doing very good. And the decision was made, we need to capitalize on what both of them are doing and focus on community supervision. And it was decided that is one effort, that a joint training unit can be formed. That was approved, of course, by General Donald as well as Commissioner Owens. That just makes sense. It's not only going to increase efficiencies, but it's also going to save money along the way and help us meet the common good. I don't want to focus all on just parole supervision. Another critical piece of what we do is making informed release decisions. As you know, when you've got the jail backlog and you have prisons at capacity, we've got a role and responsibility to make sure we're providing the board the decision information they need to make informed parole decisions to help take the burden off of the prison population. One of the things we're doing in that capacity is revamping all of our processes. Ms. Oxford mentioned those 4 positions that came over from GDC. It was ridiculous. GDC was devoting 4 staff to do the same thing that parole had 4 staff to do. It just didn't make sense. So why not just transfer them over and let 4 handle it instead of 8 handling it? That way we can get our cases prepared and presented to the board a little bit quicker so they can make informed release decisions and help the prison system. That's just a sample of the processes we're looking at in our clemency division as well.
Good. Further question. Tell me a little bit, in general, this may be a question I need, since you are the on the board itself in the head decision making. Where are y'all at on changing any of y'all's, critiquing y'all's rules or whatever you engage in on the structure of release? Dealing with, and the reason I ask this is a common question I've asked year after year. Well, y'all have to deal with all the cases. Now, quite frankly, for years, it's always been that y'all were the gatekeepers for the corrections to get them out of there, to keep the numbers balanced, that kept us out of the federal lawsuits. But we've got so many inmates out there now that, quite frankly, because of the sentencing structures and the things like this, what's the handicap to y'all right now?
It's an interesting situation. You've got to be careful what you ask for. I was commissioner, and I was always beating up Ben and my parole brothers about letting more people go, because we were at 105% capacity in many cases and sleeping people in day rooms. And but it looks a little different on this side of the fence. That is a tough job. First of all, we will never compromise public safety, which we used to say public safety is not a negotiable thing. But what we are beginning to find as we are able to put more people who've been displaced perhaps by the interoperability efforts into clemency, what we were experiencing is the opportunity to look at them a lot sooner under our concept of parole, which suggests that about 1/3 of your sentence for a person who is not a threat to the community, maybe a drug offender or something, we are getting those files much faster. And with the cons, which is our automated function that is being implemented this year, between cons implementation and this ability to get enough hands on the files so that we get them, and as an example, 5-year sentence from a judge, served 5 years, we should be looking at that sentence typically to go home somewhere around the 18th month or so. But in reality, I'm going to have to keep him in another year until we're satisfied he's been through the appropriate programming. So what we're beginning to experience, and this is the dynamic that we're going to get with the savings we're making. We're hoping not to ask for any more help from this committee, but when the commissioner says we really need not touch the parole staff, not furlough them, because every time we furlough them, those files are not being looked at. And so the idea is, as we get savings, we put them back in the clemency side of the house, and we're able to get more people looked at sooner. And I think the commissioner said at one point that 1 month, 30 days of savings equal about $3 million to the prison system. If you can get 1 month of savings at the general population, that's $3 million that he can save in a day for the prison system. And so we are taking this on because we know that in Georgia, 1 in 13 people under supervision, in Georgia, where we have a $1 billion budget for corrections, we really are overachieving compared to our brothers. One of the initiatives that we've executed that we talked, I think, briefly about is what Texas and South Carolina has been doing in terms of justice reinvestment. We're working hard. You can see some of the reinvestment when you get 4 people from offender management that is volunteered by the commission to come work for us, thus saving 4 people overall because they were doing the same task. That's sort of an example at the micro level, but at the broader level, if we can save, as you've heard, the savings in his prison closing with Metro, if we were able to harvest out of the prison system safely, about 700 spaces, that equals $35 million impact on his budget. And we have got to look at those types of opportunities, and we are.
But ultimately, would you not agree, though, that the way that corrections, that this $1 billion that we spend in corrections today, to lower that amount has got to be done by lowering the number of inmates? Yes, and that's where the idea of 2 things. One, quite frankly, would be alternative sentencing. And second would be that the parole board ratchet it up and possibly try to scrutinize these inmates a little bit closer as to who really should be in there 36 months or who should be in there 48 months, or quite frankly, which one should be in there 18 months and get them on about their life.
But that's exactly what we're doing with a lot more focus and energy right now. The Day Reporting Center, parole is now back into that. We have now an alternative sentencing option that we have. We've actually stepped up structured home supervision. It's called, remember the term house arrest? We're looking more for our medical reprieves. We've doubled the number of medical reprieves. Well, if we put them under house arrest with GPS, the fence of their yard becomes the boundary. They're still paying restitution. At the same time, we're not paying these huge amounts of money to keep them inside a state prison, and they're on Medicaid instead of being on the taxpayer's back. So we've got day reporting centers we're heavily invested in. We've got drug courts. We've got structured home confinement that we're investing in. And as we look at the overall process, we want to get the files to the board earlier so we can make an informed decision in time enough to send him to the programming we desire he has before he is released, but still inside the standard what we set for ourselves. So a lot of good things happening, and we're excited about the potential for this year, particularly with Governor Leo's thoughts on how we might save in the correction system.
Very good. Thank you.
Representative, if I may, and Chair, if I can just piggyback on something in that regard, talking about getting files quicker. When you look at over 95% of the sex offenders serving 95% of their time, violent offenders are serving upwards of 87, 88% of their time, and on average, they're serving about 71% of their time. It's a pretty tough parole board when you look nationwide what the grant rate is. But one thing, when we talk about shaping our processes, if you have a case that is eligible for parole in a range of 40 to 48 months, and you're not getting that case to the board until the 46th month, you can't say that all the board members would have let them go at 40 months, but you are missing an opportunity of 6 months on that one inmate. And that's where the real difference is coming in by realigning the processes. If you look at releases from parole, it's been the same for about 10 years, and what has happened, unfortunately, the processes in clemency have been catered to that same number being released. So that's where the true savings will be coming from in the process arena as it relates to clemency. And I apologize, I just wanted to be able to share the difference that just changing the process and getting to the board sooner can have potentially on the system.
I think the point I was getting to is that, you know, for too long we've had this idea that if you lock them up and you throw the key away. But at some point there has to be a realization that just locking them up and throwing a key away is not all that does. That's the punishment phase.
Correct.
And if we're supposed to be truly doing what we need to do, yes, there's a punishment for an infraction on the laws, but there's also got to be a rehabilitative state. And sometimes just blanketly saying, you're going to stay this amount a month, it doesn't make a hoot and hell what you've done. And quite frankly, that's not rehabilitative.
That's true.
That the punishment should fit the crime. And, you know, we know how this system works. I mean, judges and DAs, they want to be tough on crime. That sells and that works. But it has created such a monumental cost on the state's budget. And it's not really always working just to lock them up and throw that key away. Yeah. And in the rehabilitative process, I mean, quite frankly, I know that DOC has done a wonderful job over the years. They've tried to put in all the programs from, you know, programs from sex offenders to drug offenders to reentry type programs. But still, a lot of these programs don't. It amazes me when I get calls from constituents about the son. And then when I check and they say, well, he's got to get this course.
Right.
Well, why hadn't he had the course?
Yes, sir.
And so, you know, and it's because we've got so many sheer volumes of inmates, to me, that we've got to work on two problems. One is to get the number of inmates down, and then to start concentrating on the others. And then the ones who we really want to be sure we're going to have bed space for, because we don't want them back out there on the streets anytime in the near future, is the ones that need to be concentrated on.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely correct. No doubt about it.
Mr. I want to go back and ask a question or more of a clarification because it kind of threw a red flag up. You made a comment that y'all are moving forward on implementing procedures that was in the bill that we defeated last year. Was that a misunderstanding on my part?
If it was taken that way, let me rephrase it. Some of the tenets that made good business sense, that all that was lacking was simply a willingness, that's what I'm talking about. There were good parts of that bill. There were not so good parts of that bill. That's where I'm talking, Representative Bearden, on the interoperability efforts, where it makes sense and it meets the goal of public safety with enhanced efficiencies and more effectiveness. Those are the ones that we're focusing on. Those are the 55 recommendations that came up.
Okay, I'm familiar with it. I don't have a problem with agencies coming together to share office space work, but when the comment was made there was things being implemented from that bill, that brought concern up because we have heard comments in the past that basically the legislature just being, we'll vote one way, then there'll be rules and regulations made on something else that basically implement something that we voted down, and we just want to make sure that was not the case.
And I apologize if I misspoke.
Okay.
I can assure you that is not the case, sir.
Okay, I appreciate that very much, that clarification. Is there any other questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.